Welcome back to another edition of our Mental Health Mondays. We have Dr. Silsby with us, and she is going to talk about validation for more than a parking ticket. And I love the title. So I'm so excited for today. And Dr. Silsby, take it away.
All right, welcome. Hello, everyone. I suppose whether you're now or into the future, hello, future selves. Yes, today about validation, what it is, how to use it, kind of what's the and hope to give some also takeaways, some examples that you can use, apply today to make life a little bit better, easier, more connected. So I came up with this title in thinking about how use this idea of validation um, kind of casually a bit in in therapy as well. So I'm the director of training here at IVAT, which is Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma. Do a variety of different things, and a lot of times working with in conflict or having had like very difficult past childhoods, relationships. And then I also do a certain type of therapy called dialectical behavior. So this is going to be pulling a bit from that perspective, and hopefully that can be just used across the board. So let's say you are going downtown and you're going to find parking. Go to a lot and you're going to park in a lot, and it says parking is free with validation. And in here, they want to know what your intention is for using their lot. Your intention aligns with the intentional use of their lot that they have. They want to have a mutual understanding. So let's say you park at Horton Plaza, I believe is like under construction right now. It's really wild. So let's say that you go that they're going to validate for the shops there. And let's say the restaurant or the theater, you are a patron, you take your ticket, and then that shop will validate it. Give you a rating of how good of a customer you were. It doesn't ask you for a background check. And it's not used to look into the future and justify your plan you're kind of doing next. What the validation states is that you were their venue. You did come in, you were a patron, you window shop. And so when you depart, the parking lot staff can see that you did utilize with their intended purpose. And then off you go, free parking. So it's not judgment, it's not agreement, it's not problem solving. Being on the same page and having that same understanding of a business, but also in life, of course. So obviously there's a little more nuance um, intersection that comes to mind when it is about really coping with, dealing with, improving, exploring. And so the people, when those people are close to you in life, and that really it does matter. And be a way to validate, to be on the same page and to understand and express your understanding. So, yeah, like I said, what it is, why, and how. So, communication is really hard to notice. What happens in communicating is that you have an idea in your mind and you want to find a way to another person that doesn't yet have that thought in their mind. And so to speak or to communicate that idea so that way then that person picks up what it is that you're saying, they perceive that communication, and then that information around travels inside their head, and then hopefully they conclusion understanding, they get the message. And so ideally that And as you can see, like all of those steps really do make it a little more complicated. Forward, I just say this thing and then it's understood. Um, and so we'll get to why it is so important to express that you are understanding with um, it's how you're relating to another person. Um, they get in the way to make this communication hard, not only just what is the information onto another person. We all have different ideas and myths a person maybe feels about you. So people should just that. I shouldn't have to negotiate for getting what it is that I want. For me to explain, you should already know what I'm thinking, what I want, or what I'm feeling. There might also be different understandings or myths that we hold about emotions, like or emotional people don't know what they want. Maybe it's my the right way. So whatever direction the other person is thinking, it's off the bat not good, not right thinking. And so challenging. So it might not just be general communication that is why we're interacting with another person. It might be to give them some feedback of you said last week or earlier this morning or right now in this moment that actually that rubbed me the wrong way. Is that what you meant to say? Or can you a little bit more, or just straight up, I really don't want to be spoken to that way, depending on relationship and kind of gets to this next point of every single action is going to have a lot more factors as well. And so might be my mood, the other person's mood, maybe emotional overload. What else is going on, right? Variety of things to take into consideration. So ends up being this let's being on the same page, let's be present with one, and it's a way to acknowledge what is. So just like the parking ticket, it says you are here. Stamp, yes, stamp of approval, you visited. In validation, it's I am angry or you are angry. It's something that is a of what is happening in that particular situation. That it communicates to another person that that scenario and how they're responding to it. And so I'll go over a few examples as well through this. Just invalidation is hurtful. So when we are validating validation, it pulls people together to be closer rather than we might have an assumption about someone being manipulative or overreacting when we're not including enough validation or understanding first. It can sometimes convey that the other person's time or interest of your attention, that respect might not be fully there. And keeping in mind that validation is not agreement. So I can, and where another person kind of came to be, it'd be understandable that you arrived at that conclusion, you didn't know the history, or you beginning of the conversation. So it might make sense that this can sound really off, that you didn't have all of the information. You agree with or like what another person is saying in order for you to understand. So, like I was saying, so time where you felt invalidated, where someone as manipulative or out of line. And notice how does that feel when you think about that time where you really felt put down or not cared about. and it doesn't feel very good. When we do that inverse of the validating experience, escalate conflict rather than ramp it up. It can bring us closer rather than pushing us apart. So validation will show that you're listening, that you understand, or if maybe you don't quite understand, you can always say where you're coming from. I'm having a hard time. I am really working at getting there. I want things like that. So even if you don't in that moment really fully deeply under to be there, that can also feel validating in a way. Caring about the relationship, acknowledging and honoring that like your time, your presence, your and your experiences, they matter to me. Well, conversely, when you think of a time that someone offered that to you, when someone truly present, focused on what you were saying, expressing care and feeling, whether that's sadness or anger, anxiety, love, like if people are getting it, if you're really feeling heard, feeling that is like a warm feeling. Well, take a moment, feel what that feels like as well. And so this can be a corrective emotional experience. This can be that connecting glue. So, all right, great. Like, what things should I pay attention to? What things should I be that? Feelings and thoughts are going to always be valid. These experiences, and they formulate our perspective. It is that we're seeing our perceptions of around us and also what's coming up within. So these can be things that another person might totally disagree by the situation. They not might not be having thoughts about worrying outcome of this game or test or what have you is going to, where that is my internal experience. And so if I am feeling like I'm the feeling that, it can be really lonely and further feel or set aside. Whereas if my friend or family or kind human in the world that level of understanding, now I don't feel so alone in that. Last one, behaviors. This might depend on the context. So behaviors can be validate and acknowledge a particular behavior. Will be related to perhaps offering praise, seeing, wow, you really jumped there, you must have been scared. So the behavior of jump and identifying an emotion is another way of, I'll get to that, of validation. And then there can be other times, and I do have some examples here in a moment of where behavior, and so you don't have to validate what is not valid. If someone is feeling upset about a low test grade and you didn't actually study, or maybe they didn't study very much, they just kind of whipped out the book right for the class. And actually, at that moment, they're still really upset about that. Is perfectly valid to be upset about that low test grade. That validate the fact that they didn't study. You don't have to point that out in the moment or explain, oh yeah, it's low test scores come from this particular thing, and so you can acknowledge and honor how a person feels about the thing while out from, okay, well, this is why. Another example for with your partner who is short with you and you hold a lot of love for them. This dialectical thinking here, holding both of these truths to exist at the same time that they said were perhaps invalidating and hurtful, and they might even need to be And meanwhile, not to be criticizing or rejecting of who that person is. You're not going to, remove the humanness of your partner. You still love them and cherish them, and were hurtful and invalidating. So being able to kind of take some practice. So the how to balance, a lot of what I'm talking about does come out of the DBT skills training manual. There's all for teens. If you're interested in diving in there or finding treatment that incorporates this, if you're on the search for therapists, there's also a lot of like card decks that talk about DBT skills, kind of self-led workbooks that are available out there. So anyways, I've connected the at on the last page, and hopefully you can access some handouts. Head to the references page. So the first kind of step of validating is by active listening. Being present is here for me to be perceiving right now, but assuming that there are many of you listening and doing this one mindfully, just it's the only thing you're doing. I'm now hearing me. So not underestimating the listening and showing up for the other person. Into this other one of being present, showing a person not only with your verbal, nonverbal, perhaps offering a hug or passing a tissue, or getting up and getting active, depending on what this is, to sort of like undesirable emotions like anger, sadness, can also be joy. Maybe identifying an emotion, maybe mind reading a little bit, with the caveat that you might be wrong, okay? But kind of picking up on cues of how the other person is, and maybe an emotion word. And this can be related, I think, if there's been a time when someone else has been able to find a word for exactly how you moment, maybe at a time that you weren't even quite sure what it was that you said that word, and immediately it hit, it landed. And of this step here is sometimes just calling it emotion, and that can feel also very validating and comforting. Reflecting back how this makes sense given the person's based on what is going on in the moment. Sense, of course you're going to be upset with a low test grade. I've been there. They get a bad test grade, they feel disappointed. Again, regardless of sort of what that was not studying enough, or maybe a lot of studying and just a really hard test, then yeah, in this moment, this makes sense based on what it is that's going on. You also might reflect back based on how the person's history is. Show tolerance to one another, given that each of us have our own histories that we carry, experienced a variety of other things. And if someone has lost their parent when they were younger, that is not. And so based on the individual who lost their parent at a young age, that there can be certain things that make sense given that context that might not be for. So really thinking about, just because that's not exactly like how want to be treated, you treat others how they would want to be treated, because each of us are carrying around stuff, things close to our heart or things more like obvious and out in the open. But to sit there and understand and hear the plight of where another person has come, if you yourself haven't had that particular experience, but given their And then lastly, just be yourself, fragilize the other person and not bring up something that might be actually concerning. Um, trusting the other person is not incompetent. They can have a real conversation and just showing up as you are, both seriously, believing them when they show you who they are, and also bringing yourself to the point I made earlier of sharing that you're seeking to understand if you're not. So feel free to pause here, give these a practice. You can write these down, you could take a screenshot. So this work that if you want to practice validating other people, here are some things you can write down, validating statements throughout the week that you catch yourself, that you notice yourself saying. You can write down, okay, what exactly was the situation here? And how did the other person feel? I didn't write that down, I guess, but how did you feel after you validated? And then what might you say or do differently next time? So there's always things we do well and then things that can be improved upon. And that is part of what here. Just as we can also validate ourselves. So self-validation is maybe more, probably about the same, just different scenario. Validation strategies will relate to as well. So the first active thing, listen to yourself, show up, be there as you would another person. Describing your feelings, naming your, if you're not quite sure what that emotion yet is, what are your body sensations that you're having? What are the urges that you have? Really writing those down, describe out can be helpful. And then perhaps tossing out an emotion, honoring that and saying it, and remembering that emotions are always valid. Personal experience. Number 4, acknowledge how you understand present context. And then the next bit of understanding how they make sense in history. And number 6, taking yourself seriously. Your emotions, your thoughts, your perceptions to a given scenario, and to be kind to yourself as much as you would be kind to the next person. So again, kind of a similar, here's another prompt. Invalidated or defend. Pause before responding, using strategies, practicing letting go of judgments. That is, we just continue to practice for my whole life. And consider what you, child or a dear friend or a mentor, if you're really feeling stuck on, is it that I find compassion for myself? Sometimes taking a step outside and thinking about that awareness as well. And to consider that it might, in fact, be more than one emotion experience going on at that time. The last couple thoughts I had when writing this up was actually that there's times you will be invalidated. So this is on validation, and so to hopefully have that for your and be validating with other people who are in your life and you want around and care for. There's going to be times where we are going to be invalidated, and that might be when our mistakes, getting things wrong on an exam. If going back and thinking, well, I actually didn't study. There's feedback, right, for myself. No one else probably needs to point that out. Maybe I did study a great deal and I still didn't get a good test score. Okay, well, maybe there's some areas, very direct feedback about what it was that I didn't get right. This can also be of like how we're communicating, text messaging, sending out like clear, and then come to find out that my partner did not think it was clear at on two different planes. So it is can sometimes feel painful to hear that feedback, and it can still be helpful. It might also be where it stimulates your personal growth or perspectives. This I've discussing diverging opinions on various topics. Low level, less significant, and absolutely higher level, more impactful videos. And so, again, to remove a moral, seek first to understand. I'm going to mess up that whole quote. Be there and show up, and it sometimes does expand a particular perspective. You might not, but it kind of widens that openness. Also, just be straight painful with there's no learning here, because actually, in this case, misunderstood particular facts of the situation or about who you are, dismissed. Receiving unequal treatment absolutely can be and more than an issue, invalidating. And so this might be correctly identified as invalid or identified as invalid. And in some of those, our private experiences might not have a direct resolution. There might not be an ability to problem solve. And so, and sometimes there are, and which point, really great. My partner, the text messages, that was an evening, that was a fairly quick fix. But they're invalidating experiences in relationships and communities and world, and there might not be that direct. I think both sides, these are some tips to round this out. How here are some things you can look at. I'm just checking my notes here. Yeah, used in any when you feel that. Maybe you notice a little bit of defensiveness coming up, or maybe a lot. Acknowledging when your actions don't make sense, and also actually that did make sense there, right? So being able to differentiate and into what it is that's going on, to know, is this something that I should correct, or is this something actually this isn't about me? And tons of compassion to yourself, grieving traumatic and if this is by a person whom you care deeply about, that was really disruptive in life, there can be a lot of grief that comes along with that and processing, and that's okay. I guess owning it, but noticing that, and doesn't make you weak. Actually, I think that takes a very strong person reflect upon these things. And remembering, thinking about the levels of self-validation to be there, and knowing that accepting and validation, it doesn't mean agreeing or liking or condoning. These are some things that we can do internally, so that way we can show up better our loved ones, in our communities, for ourselves, in order to be resilient. So I hope this helps. Is why we should do it, and some tips on how you can do it. And the last little bit of references here were the books I had talked about, if you want to really nerd out. That is all. Thank you so much.
Excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much for this presentation. Validation is an excellent topic, and it's something that we can utilize for ourselves. I know that you were frozen here and there, but you did give us the PowerPoint, so I'm excited about that, and I will post that along with this video. And definitely great tips, especially for parents to use as well, and just to use with yourself when it comes to how to validate, right? Like sometimes we think we're validating, but we're actually invalidating. And so really differentiating between the two. So I appreciate that. So we'll look forward to our last Mental Health Monday of this year, which will be the first Monday in December. And we look forward to gaining more skills and how we can just overall have better